We are looking to enhance the laptop store project from the YByte Python curriculum available at www.ybyte.in. Previously, we improved our user interface a little bit by showing the player these options, which are available while ordering. So it kind of helps a little bit, definitely. But still, the whole process is very cumbersome and prone to mistakes because we keep asking for preference for every, let's say, specification, and the player is expected to answer none. Sometimes you make a mistake on these things, and the whole game can sort of go, let's say, a little bit haywire. Now, what we are going to look at in this video is to sort of make this process a little bit more efficient and, let's say, more user friendly. The idea that we are going to explore by the way of improving the user interface is to say that, look, most likely the player or the user or whoever came into purchase most likely will not have a preference for all the specifications. In fact, usually people would have just one or two, let's say, high level specifications, perhaps the brand. Some people are very particular about RAM, or some could be very particular about price. So just 1 or 2 points, or maybe let's say 2 or 3 points. Now what we can do is, instead of asking for all of them and having the person respond none, none, none for all of them, in fact we can preempt the process a little bit. We can ask upfront what are the specifications that are important to the player, and only then we ask for the preference for those specifications. For everything else, we can make the user choice as none. So this is the broad idea. The implementation has a few more steps, but this is the idea that we are going to work towards. So I come back to my code over here. Instead, like I said, here we are asking for preference for every specification, but let's say before doing that, I just get a sense of what all the person purchasing, let's say, wants to specify, right? So I can just put a question here saying that, look, please indicate your preference, and just call it pref. Let's say is input. Say please indicate the features, the specifications, let's say, where you have a preference. So instead of saying tell me preference for, let's say, brand, tell me preference for, let's say, cost, tell me preference for screen size, and so on, let's just ask upfront what are the preferences that you have, and let's say and just say comma separated. So which means that the answer here could be, let's say, something like say brand comma price, let's say. Now we are going to convert this into a list so that we can process this. So I just go and say pref, let's say list is equal to, say, pref dot split, because we are expecting a comma separated, let's say, input, and I separate with a comma. Now let's just see this for a moment. We'll realize that in fact there's a little bit more work we need to do, but let's see what happens when I do this. So you now notice it tells me, look, please tell me the specifications where you have a preference. So for example, I could say maybe brand and perhaps let's say RAM. So when I do this now, so I'll stop the program here for now, but let's just look at the string pref. It's brand and RAM because that's what I answered. The pref list is brand and RAM, but there's a small little problem that there is a small little leading space ahead of RAM. This happened because after brand there was a comma and then a space. Now in order to move forward, we need to remove this space. Now people might have put a space in the beginning, in the end, and so on and so forth, so we can't be very sure, but we basically need to look at all of these items on this list and remove the space from them. Basically we need to do something which runs on every item of that list. A very effective method for this purpose is to run what is called the map command. So I'm just going to say pref list, for example, say list. I will let's say, let me just complete this and we'll talk about this. Say map str.strip, let's say pref and list. So what I'm doing here is that I'm telling, look, please take my pref list, and for each of those items please run this command string, which is string function called strip. Now strip, remember, will remove the spaces, any leading spaces and trailing spaces. The important point is, since you're putting this inside the map, this function here will run on every item of the list, and then again I convert this back to a list. So let's just, maybe I'll just put a print over here. Let's say pref list, and then I can put an input here for now so that the code stops. Now when I run this, let's say I say brand and say price. You notice the prep list now is brand and price, exactly what I had wanted it to be. This space is no longer bothering us. So this is some kind of like preconditioning we need to do. Now having done this, of course, I'm going to remove these two. So basically I've obtained in a list what all specifications does the user have, some kind of preference for. Now when I ask for preference, in fact, instead of asking for everything, what we will do is that we'll just say, okay, look for KK in specs, exactly like here. I will ask myself if KK in say pref list. So which means, player or say user has a preference on this specification. So if let's say this is the case, which means the player has some preference on that particular specification, nothing changes here. Everything remains exactly the same. So I just get my user's choice, basically in exactly the same way, but just have to do the indentation, because now this must be inside if KK in let's say pref list. If KK, however, is not, right? Let's say KK is not, then well, I need to just go and say, look, in this case, I know that my user choice, say KK, is equal to, let's say, none. Now, if you think about it, we are doing exactly what we were doing earlier, except that we are doing it in a little bit more, let's say, efficient manner. Previously, if the player did not have a preference, we were expecting the player to tell us a none. Now we are saying that, okay, look, I know you don't have a preference, let me automatically populate a none for you. Now, it's possible that player indicated, let's say, some specification here and later on change the mind. In this case, the player can again enter a none for those, where we do ask a preference. Let me just say comma separated and put, let's say, put a colon over here. Now when I look at this, let's say I have a preference for brand, I have a preference for, let's say, RAM, and let's say I have a preference for price. Now notice what happens. It tells me, well, any preference for brand. Yes, it knows there's a preference for brand. I could have said, please indicate preference for brand. We'll fix that. Let's say I say W Dell. It tells me preference for RAM. So yes, maybe I want a 4 GB RAM. Preference of price. Let's say, okay, I think I changed my mind. I want to say, no, there's no preference for that. So the query is forming correctly. Brand is W Dell. Laptop RAM is 4 GB. If I look at this, well, it turned out that no laptop met my specification. That's fine. But you see, the whole process has become a lot more smooth, let's say streamlined and user friendly. I can change this any to, let's say, your preference, so that the whole logic seems quite sensible. Notice now clearly this user interface is much more user friendly and represents an improvement from where we started. And in the process, we have learned some interesting commands, for example, like the map command, and just kind of putting it all together in a nice way. And that's the whole idea behind a bonus, that once we do these projects, we learn something more from it. If you like this way of learning, where we build an activity, we analyze it carefully, enhance it, look at our website, because that is the style in which we learn Python. Take care. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.